fire had seemed to burn out so quickly. To those who investigate abduction cases, it's known as missing time. Perhaps as much as 3 hours had passed during the abduction, from the time the men first saw the UFO until the time they found themselves standing on the beach. Meanwhile, their fire had burned down to embers. Hypnosis had restored their recollections of the missing time with unsparing intensity. But now there was no hiding from the memories, no hiding from the trauma of what had apparently happened at Smith Pond.
I mean, every time I had one of these experiences, I would rationalize it as a dream so I could cope with it and say, well, what the heck is really going on here? Is it related to my seizure disorder? Is it, something I'm eating? Do I have a brain tumor? Am I working too hard, or am I under a lot of stress? What the heck could possibly cause this kind of repetitive experience?
The Allagash Four are not alone. Their story is remarkably similar to the accounts of thousands of other ordinary people who face the nightmarish certainty that they have been in the hands of aliens. Still, despite all the convincing testimony, the subject of alien abductions is the source of bitter controversy. As sensational as the Allagash incident may seem, it is simply one of the thousands of abduction cases that have been reported. Among UFO researchers, it is regarded as a reliable report with solid eyewitness testimony. Indeed, for those who have examined the case closely, it confirms that at least some people have come face to face with alien creatures.
If you had the amount of evidence for the reality of the Allagash abductions for any other subject, any mundane subject, in a court of law, you could hang a person probably. But because of the bizarre nature of the case, that's not going to happen. People aren't going to accept that evidence, although the evidence is there.
The evidence includes 4 men who were psychologically examined and given polygraph tests before undergoing hypnosis. 4 men who reported remarkably similar accounts of the same event. 4 men who have spent the past several years trying to come to grips with the fact that they were part of something out of their realm of understanding.
I've heard it all, everything. Oh, they must have been on LSD, and people have said, I don't believe a word you say, you're nuts, you're crazy, you belong in a straitjacket. And I say, well, it's part of my life, I can't deny it. And one of the things that's really weird is that you find yourself getting used to the idea that you've been abducted, and that's weird in itself. I mean, how do you get used to something like that?
It has been over 20 years since the alleged encounter. The Allagash incident has been added to the body of reports that argue the abduction phenomenon is real. But this case is not without its own controversy. While 3 of the men are confident the event took place, the 4th is now not so sure.
I'm not denying this happened. I'm just skeptical about the abduction part of the story. To that extent, it wasn't like a visceral reality experience. It wasn't like a true memory. And that's what I had trouble with for years and years and years. Certainly, I shared the experience with the rest of the guys, and they might take that as remembering a real experience, but it's not. The encounter is real. I know that. But regressive hypnosis several years later, I don't know.
The fact that Chuck Rack backed off his abduction story, to me it doesn't have too much significance. Maybe he has since thought about this thing and doesn't want to think it actually happened to him, but nonetheless, his recollections of what occurred back then are consistent with what the others have remembered, either consciously or through hypnosis.
However, researchers like Kevin Randall, who is convinced that UFOs are real, continue to question the Allagash abduction.
They clearly had a UFO sighting. Clearly that event took place. But we've now blurred the boundary between reality and fantasy. We worked for thousands of years so that we understood that dreams were dreams. They were fantasy. They were not necessarily a reflection of reality. And yet in abduction research, if you dream about being abducted, well, that's all accurate information. And we've got to get back and take a solid psychological look at this.
Yet, not all abductions can be written off as dreams. In fact, neither Betty and Barney Hill nor the Allagash Four were even asleep when their abduction was said to have taken place. Among the many controversies surrounding abductions is the use of hypnosis to recall the experience. The technique was first used in 1961 by Dr. Benjamin Simon in the case of Betty and Barney Hill. Advocates of hypnosis claim it can help to unlock suppressed memories and provide investigators with details of unearthly and often frightening events.
I use hypnosis to help people relax, and in a relaxed trance state, they seem to have access to these memories which have been, as it were, systematically blocked by the UFO occupants.
New York City artist and best-selling author Bud Hopkins is one of the leading pioneers in UFO abduction research. Hopkins claims that since 1975, he has unearthed an enormous number of similar incidents. His two books, Intruders and Missing Time, have set the standards for investigating this mysterious phenomenon.
A typical hypnosis session starts with a very sharp, clear focus on a particular event. Let's say two people in a car and the car stopping, and they see a UFO. Everyone is paralyzed. They cannot move. Often the ship will land on the highway or hover, and little figures, small gray figures with huge black eyes, will approach the car. Usually what happens next, if the craft is on the highway, they walk up into it, but more often if it's hovering, they go up a beam of light.
Perhaps surprisingly, many of Hopkins' alien abduction reports come not from isolated backwoods locales, but from high-rise buildings and automobiles in New York City. His subjects report smooth, gray beings, missing time, human experiments, and paralysis. It all sounds like science fiction gone wild, yet hundreds of seemingly ordinary people report these experiences.
I'm 46 years old. I have two grown kids. My daughter's 23, my son is 20. I've been married for 26 years, and I've earned a good living as a musician and a graphic artist. And for all intents and purposes, have lived a very dull, normal, mundane kind of a life.
But John says he's been abducted at night from his home in New York City.
They usually start at home in the middle of the night. I'll be in a dead sleep, and I'll either jump up with a start, and they'll be in the room, and then the paralysis comes on where I just can't move.
Rosemary says she was lured by aliens to the roof of her apartment in Midtown Manhattan.
I've been coming up the apartment stairs on my fifth floor apartment, and I saw this strange light coming through the skylight. And the minute I got up to the roof, there was this dark circle in the sky. And I noticed it for a few seconds, and then suddenly a beam of light came and hit me and paralyzed me and started to lift me up into the bottom of this round disc-shaped thing.
And I'll be taken out of the house and on board a craft, and the medical procedures are performed. I remember it's a round room. There's a pedestal table in the middle of this thing. There are instruments and things that come right out of the walls and from the ceiling. I'll be placed on the table. I'm immobilized. I can't move.
Basically, they just put me on a table, and then some kind of a device came down and hit me in the chest because I wasn't breathing very well. And there were these beings around me.
This taller being will come over, and there's usually a few of them around me at that point, and one is acting kind of as an anesthetist, where he's keeping me calmed and reassured, while the other guy is performing all of these really painful, intrusive physical procedures.
Ultimately, abduction cases rest on the credibility of the witnesses themselves.
If you trace the history of this, before this subject was even known, before it was all over television, before people were aware of it, the patterns were already established. So it seems to me there are only two apparent possible explanations for this. Either they really are being abducted, or there is some totally unprecedented, unknown mass hallucination or delusion going on, and that should be of great interest to science too.
Clearly, no one would believe